The Goat House is back with the latest and biggest NFL trade candidates to watch this offseason with some landing spots, and I'll make some predictions at this early stage. Excited to break this down. Let's get started. Matthew Stafford, the newest big trade candidate to watch based on the rumors, a crazy amount of rumors around Stafford right now, specifically linking him to the Giants, but his wife kind of even hinting at things could be changing. He could be going elsewhere. So very interesting. What would his value be? Pretty interesting there because he's older, expiring deal. You might need to rework the deal. The Rams, if they were to keep him, they would have to rework that deal because he has around a $49 million cap hit. Could easily be done though. So because he's so talented still, and he could instantly, just like for the Rams, how when he went from the Lions to the Rams, he instantly can make someone more of a contender. So could go for a mid to late first round pick if it's not a first, multiple day twos. But man, it's hard to see him away from the Rams. He's still playing top tier ball, and the Rams are a contender as long as they have him. So very interesting. Top landing spots. The Vikings come to mind. I mean, the Giants are being talked about a ton right now. For him to play out his last year or years in the NFL with the Giants, it's kind of hard to see. But there's some connections there with the staff. Yeah, he'd be throwing to Malik Neighbors. People talking about Cooper Kupp coming over there with them. I don't see both. That's a lot of cap space they have to dish out, and then they wouldn't be able to focus on other things. But it'd be very interesting. But again, back to the Vikings. Kevin O'Connell coached them. Super Bowl year with the Rams. He was the offensive coordinator. The Vikings are looking for a quarterback. It'd be a perfect situation for J.J. McCarthy, who was injured all year, to kind of learn one more year. But this time for Matthew Stafford would make a lot of sense. Steelers, if they got a guy like Matthew Stafford, they could actually win playoff games for a change. And they got the Raiders. I could see the Raiders a little bit more of a dark horse, but they have a decent offensive line, so he doesn't have to worry about that going there. Pete Carroll, veteran. I'm sure Stafford thinks highly of him. The Jets, they got to focus on the offensive line. The Titans as well. So maybe those teams that need a quarterback are a little less likely. So my prediction, I think this is getting blown up a little too much right now. It certainly there's some people around the league that say it's more likely to happen than it is not. So that's pretty crazy. But people making too big of a deal about that cap number. The Rams could easily either adjust his contract if he agrees to it, or they can just restructure it and push money down the line in future years, even if he's not under contract in future years, and they have a ton of cap space in the future, so they can easily make that work. So I'm still going to predict that if he's traded. A lot of people are saying the Giants right now. I'll say the Vikings, and it's maybe an even split, close to even split between the Vikings, Giants, and Steelers. I more so want to go with more of those contending teams, the Vikings and the Steelers. Maybe that's generous calling them contending teams, but if they had Stafford, and the Giants would be a lot better, obviously, but it's so hard for me to see him play his last year or last 2 years of his career with the Giants, even though, again, starting to get some weapons. They could be a little decent. They have some spending money as well, but Kevin O'Connell connection there, that makes a lot of sense, and the Vikings would be much more of a threat in the playoffs with Stafford. They know that compared to where they were last year, and they were a great team during the regular season. In their minds, they got to be like, that's a major letdown. We got to take that next step. We can't win 14 games, not go anywhere. So going to get a guy like Matthew Stafford may take care of that, right? So I'm not counting on a trade right now, even though people think it definitely could happen. I'm not saying 0% chance, though. So definitely an interesting name to watch this next month or so. Let's touch on Cooper Kupp again, update some things here, but I still think the value is a 5th-round pick, plus the Rams pay a portion of his salary. They definitely can make that work, and they're going to need to if they want to trade him and get something in return. Again, a 6th-round pick is possible. 4th is somewhat possible. I'm not really counting on that. In terms of the landing spots, Commanders, Texans, Steelers, Broncos, Lions, and Falcons are the teams that stand out the most. There's other teams, but do I see the Patriots? I think they'd rather go younger. Why get a declining guy? You have a lot of cap space. Go sign guys. Go draft guys. So these are the teams that make the most sense. It's a little bit up in the air. Right now, today, if I had to predict if he got traded, I would lean with the Commanders. He's still very valuable as a blocker in the run game. And if Jaden Daniels escapes, he can help downfield blocking with that. And he's a solid pass catcher still. I think it'd be an appealing spot for him. I think he would fit in Kingsbury's offense. But pretty even chances for a lot of these teams here. But the Commanders are in need of a slot receiver. But it is a little tricky, too, because I think teams are going to wait. They're going to wait around, see if they can add one of the other receivers that are a little more appealing. We'll talk about Deebo Samuel in a little bit. But guys in free agency, T. Higgins, Chris Godwin. Does Devontae Adams get cut? Does Tyler Lockett get cut, etc. So I think teams are kind of waiting for that. So there is a shot he can get cut, or he ends up back with the Rams on a rework deal. Of course, those are possibilities as well. So leaning Commanders if he is actually traded, but that's a little up in the air. If he's cut, that would mean maybe was not as appealing as we thought. I think he ends up going to a familiar system. So some of these teams have guys on the staff that coached Cooper Kupp with the Rams. The Texans just hired Nick Caley as their offense coordinator, was just with the Rams staff, and the Falcons have, Raheem Morris is the head coach. He was a defensive guy. Zach Robinson, the offense coordinator. Texans definitely could use another receiver, specifically a slot receiver. The Falcons could use a slot receiver as well. They run 3 receivers on the field at once, just as much, if not more than anyone in the league. So they need someone on top of London and Mooney. And again, there's familiar faces there. So I do like those teams as well. And they're a possibility if traded. So this one's a little up in the air. Teams could wait to see if they can get someone else first. The Lions have been mentioned. I don't love the fit personally with the Lions. He's strictly a slot receiver. Amon-Ra St. Brown is the top slot receiver in football. So someone's going to have to play limited, not St. Brown, play limited. Kupp's going to have to play more limited snaps, or someone's going to have to play more on the outside. I don't love that. Like, can St. Brown play on the outside? Of course, he does it plenty of times, but you got to use him in the slot as much as possible. That's where he's an absolute mismatch. So I've heard watch for the Lions. People in the league think that because the Goff, Brad Holmes connection. I personally don't love the fit, so I'm not going to predict it, but it could happen. Another Rams player that is not being talked about right now, but I think you should watch for is Jonah Jackson, who was actually one of their big free agent signings of last offseason. He got paid a little bit more than I expected. It was a little bit of a surprise that he landed there at that price, and he got benched. They tried to use him at center, and he got benched during the year. So I don't think they really have much use for him. He's got experience. The Rams would still pay part of his contract, so he wouldn't be overly expensive for the acquiring team, $9 million. So that kind of makes him a little more valuable. So at first glance, it's like Rams don't even want him. They don't want to even use him. They want to clear that space. He's worth nothing. But then other teams might be bidding, and they might be fighting for him because, hey, we could afford this. He's got experience. He played well with the Lions 2 years ago. At guard, you would like him to play specifically that left guard position. I was surprised about the center thoughts by the Rams. But he's versatile. He can play either spot, apparently. So what I'm getting to is his value could go up a little bit more than you think. 5th round pick, could even go to a 4th just because you get a starting guard. That's pretty rare. Top landing spots, I look at the Bears, Commanders, Ravens, Texans. I specifically looked for teams that I think he could fit, that could use a guard, but more so left guard. I really think that's where he fits, he got that contract last year based off his play with the Lions, where he played left guard. If he is cut, if the Rams decide to cut him, hey, we'll let you go find a new home maybe to start. I would add all of the other NFC West teams to that equation. And of course, it's possible they could trade for him. It's happening a little more often lately where teams trade to a rival. It used to be, no, we're not doing that. It's a little more likely now. So those teams are a possibility via trade, but why would they help each other out? But Seattle, Arizona, San Francisco, they all could use a left guard. They would all be interested in Jackson. Arizona stands out maybe a little bit more than the other two, but Seattle's really desperate for guards as well. I'm just going to say he lands with the Bears. The Bears badly need offensive line help. Every position but right tackle. I know some think maybe they could make way with both their tackles. I like Darnell Wright at right tackle, but they badly need interior offensive line help. Ben Johnson will value it. Ben Johnson coached Jonah Jackson when he played very well at the Detroit Lions. So a lot of things make sense here. Ends up with the Bears, my prediction, if he's traded or if he's cut. But again, those other NFC West teams become more of an option if he's cut. But of course, possibility if traded. But that's a name to watch here, unless the Rams have a new plan for him and they feel like playing him. But they got options on the O-line. They just got to take a look at that left tackle option this offseason with Alaric Jackson, being a free agent. So we'll see what happens there. Watch for him to pop up this offseason. Bengals linebacker Jermaine Pratt very recently requested a trade, which actually makes a lot of sense for multiple reasons. The Bengals change defensive coordinator. So you see it all the time with players, but with linebackers specifically. New defensive coach comes in, whether he changes the scheme or not, he's just not a fit with these linebackers. They change linebackers. They move on from one. So Pratt could see that. Maybe he's getting an idea. That's what the Bengals think, and maybe they're a little bit down on him after last year. And also he's got an expiring deal, so may want a new contract. But he is under contract for this upcoming year, just expired after that year. So could get traded, could possibly get cut if he just wants out and the Bengals don't want him. Value be pretty cheap, 6th round, maybe 7th round pick. Again, this past year he struggled, but before that, pretty solid. Had some flashes here and there, good experience with that Bengals defense. I know the whole Bengals defense was down this year, so even though he played pretty poorly, so maybe it's just a change of scenery, what's around him more so. The Colts have some familiar faces on the coaching staff. That's why I'm predicting it too. They could use a linebacker as well. Their linebackers were pretty poor in coverage. They racked up the tackles. They were pretty poor in coverage this offseason. Titans could use a linebacker. Hey, Brian Callahan's over there. I know he coached the Bengals on offense, but a familiar face. Buccaneers are, Levante David probably going to retire. They could use a linebacker as well. Cowboys are going to value linebacker even more with Eberflus in there. And Pratt's a little cheaper. They can't spend a lot. And you got Overshown, who I love, but another injury, and that was later in the year. Raiders and Broncos could use linebackers as well, and they'll take a deep look at free agency. Those two teams, but we'll see. I'm going to predict the Colts. Again, they could use a linebacker. They could use an upgrade specifically in coverage at linebacker, and Pratt could do that. Not that he's going to be the best in the world, but Lou Anarumo coached him with the Bengals for a bit, so Anarumo's going, yeah, maybe he had an off year last year, but I know this guy can play. I know he fits my defense. And his linebacker coach from the Bengals went over with Anarumo to the Colts, so it makes a lot of sense there. It'd be really cheap for the Colts to add someone and just get a little bit better, at the linebacker position, whether it's traded or cut. Just think he ends up landing with the Colts. It's very logical. A lot of people probably agree with that, but it doesn't mean he's guaranteed there. He could end up somewhere else. There's going to be some interested teams for sure. We'll touch on Bryce Huff again a little bit. Talked about him recently, but the Eagles' big-time addition in free agency wasn't so big-time for them. Just couldn't really get on the field, couldn't stay on the field, was inactive for the Super Bowl, and they had plenty of pass rush without him. So they didn't really love what they saw from Huff. Maybe they didn't really view him as a fit like they thought he would be, so they could just look to move on from him. It's a very tradable contract. The Eagles aren't going to free a ton, but they could add another pick. They're so good at drafting, so good at adding talent. So why not? Maybe they want to work with Huff. Maybe because they could lose Sweat. Definitely possible that they let Sweat go because he's going to get paid a ton of money this free agency. And then they just work with Huff. Maybe they're going to go, let's not panic. Let's just keep him, work with him a little bit. If he's depth, then he's depth, right? But a 5th round pick or even a 6th if they're just dying to get rid of him. The Falcons and 49ers stand out right away. I also like the Cardinals, Bucks, and Panthers. He seemed like a good fit in their schemes, and they need a pass rusher. But right away, the Falcons and 49ers stand out right away because familiar coaches. Robert Saleh back with the Niners. He coached Huff with the Jets, and he had that big career year before this past year. And then Jeff Ulbrich was the Jets defensive coordinator and interim coach this past year. Now, when Huff was there, he is now the defensive coordinator with the Falcons. So you see some big-time connections there, and he's not going to fit every team. He's a specific role type of player, obvious passing downs. Those coaches know how to use them. And I want to say for prediction, I couldn't make up my mind, Falcons or 49ers, but I have other bigger plans for the 49ers. There's a few guys that I think are going to get cut that I think you take a good look at. Joey Bosa and Samson Ebukam. I think both maybe could end up on the Niners if they are cut. I think one or both are going to be cut, but Huff is another option as well. And then maybe the Niners will be interested in a big name player that we're going to talk about as well. But they're a little bit of a dark horse for that. So I'll say the Falcons. The Falcons don't have a ton of picks, but they easily could use a 2026 pick, which they actually have more than the average for. So I would watch out for, if the Eagles are good to trade him, maybe like a 2026 5th round pick here. So the Falcons make a ton of sense. The Falcons have a lot of coaching connections with a lot of trade candidates this cycle, this offseason. So they're an interesting team. They don't have a lot of cap space right now, but they have very easy ways to clear it. They will. Don't have a lot of draft picks right now to trade, but they have future picks. Deebo Samuel, a big-time trade candidate. A lot of buzz around him right now. Wanted to update my thoughts for sure. They have changed a little bit here. Value, I think a 4th-round pick is high as a 3rd, as low as a 5th. But some teams got to pay him. He declined a little bit last year. Does have durability concerns. If you use him the full dose, like you're handing the ball like crazy, then he does have durability concerns. But if you use him just right, he's a major, major factor. Still has some talent. He seems to be excited about playing elsewhere. So he definitely can help a team out. A specific brand of football he has and that he could help out, right? And that, I mean, I love the fit with the Ravens. Imagine him with Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry. That is really growing on me. And they can make it work. They're a little thin on cap space, but they could always make it work. And they use him maybe for 1 year and then decide to kind of, move on from him or keep him around for another year. I could definitely see it's a Ravens type move there. The Steelers, Arthur Smith's offense, underneath game, run the ball a bit. Definitely can see that. The Texans, DeMeco Ryans knows all about Deebo Samuel, even though DeMeco's a defensive guy, but he was with the Niners. If Slowick was still there, which he's not, if Slowick was still there, I would predict the Texans. I would predict, yes, the Texans are going to get him, and they definitely still could get him. The Broncos, they definitely could use another receiver, something a little different style than Cortland Sutton, and Sean Payton is looking for that gadget-type guy that he likes in his type of offense, and he came out and say he's looking for it. A guy that's, a little bit of receiver, a little bit of running back. It sure sounds like Deebo Samuel, so that makes you want to predict the Broncos. And the Commanders are going to be involved in almost every receiver. Patriots were involved in Deebo, but I'm at the point where just go get young guys. Go get guys will be good, will be healthy. So, but the Patriots are a possibility as well, and I'm sure there's some other teams. But tough prediction. I love the Ravens fit, probably my favorite one. They're a little tight on cap, but I think the biggest issue, they have Zay Flowers, and Rashad Bateman broke out. They were insisting on Bateman while he was known as kind of a bust, but decent. But they were insisting on him, especially for this year, and then boom, he broke out. He looked really good this year. So they run 2 receivers, multiple tight ends. You're rarely going to see 3 receivers on the field at once for the Baltimore Ravens. So Deebo would love to play with Lamar Jackson and those guys, but, is he going to be on the bench a lot? Is he going to be pissy about it? But then you could argue he could be pissy about the Steelers' quarterback situation, but they're going to scheme a lot of things up for him. But I do get the sense he wants to be a receiver. He can run the ball, but he wants to catch the ball downfield. And the Ravens would rather use Zay Flowers or Rashad Bateman for that. So I definitely could see the Ravens still. That's why they're high up on my list here. Steelers, Texans could see, again, if they had Slowick to be my prediction. The Broncos, because what Sean Payton is looking for, definitely can see that. My guts tell me, my gut's a little 50-50. I could see them definitely adding him, but my guts also tell me, Sean Payton's going to kind of hand pick and grow that guy. So basically, a very young guy, a draft pick, is somewhat likely, whether it's a couple of those running backs in the draft are really good pass catchers. I mean, Jaden Blue is the one that, we're getting off topic, but that's the one that stands out to me for Sean Payton. But if we're talking tight end, Tyler Warren, you're going to have to go way up, though. But that'll be interesting. But maybe if they feel like they can't find that guy, hey, go get Deebo then. But I'm going to go Steelers. Really good fit for Arthur Smith's offense. They need another receiver with George Pickens. They really need a slot receiver, but Arthur Smith's scheme doesn't really, those, quick, small, like your prototypical slot receivers really don't work in that. Going back to the Falcons, they didn't even use those prototypical type slot receivers. They aligned guys there at times. Pitts was there a lot of times. So a guy that could be a bit of everything in an underneath offense type player makes a lot of sense. So I'll go the Steelers, but the reason I argue against that is quarterback situation. But they could end up with a decent quarterback. Maybe they have a plan. Maybe it's Stafford. Maybe it's Sam Darnold. I don't know if that's going to happen. Russell Wilson, Justin Fields. Is that not that appealing to Deebo Samuel? We'll see. But an interesting one to watch here. Again, if the Bengals feel like they're going to lose T. Higgins, they could be an option as well. But yeah, Deebo, even though he's declined a little bit as durability concerns, he's a fun player. This is going to be a fun watch to see where he ends up. Myles Garrett, maybe him and Stafford are the biggest trade candidates of the offseason. We talked about him a bit. We'll talk a little bit more. 2 first-round picks, maybe a day 3 pick on top of that. I think his value is top landing spots. We've mentioned the Commanders several times. Looking for teams that could afford him now. He's expensive, could afford him in the future because he'll be expensive, needs a new deal. Could trade the picks. won't have any problems. If they could afford him, can they not afford other things? Do they need other things? So I'm kind of looking at those teams for the most part. Commanders and Chargers check a ton of boxes. The Packers are really growing on me. They're looking for a more consistent pass rusher. Rashawn Gary's really solid. He just kind of shows up in spurts. Could they move him then? That'd be pretty crazy. Or could they use both? And they switched their scheme last year to a 4-3, so Garrett fits right in line with that. So that would make some sense. They would be very, very, very limited in the future, though, while adding Garrett on top of that Love contract. They have cap space this year, not in the future. Lions are in the same boat. Some people are believing the Lions are big-time watch for Myles Garrett. Some people are like, yeah, they're not going to make that splash trade. They have cap space this year. They are very limited in the future. But, man, they could be sitting there watching the Eagles win the Super Bowl because of pass rush and offensive line, and they're going to be going, we got offensive line, and we got pretty good pass rush if it's healthy. If we go out and add this guy, my God, we're a force. So maybe that's a thought there. The Bears, I've heard the Bears mention, yeah, he would fit Dennis Allen. The Bears love trading picks for decent or great players in this case. They can't help themselves trading picks, but they already invested a lot with the pick and money in Montez Sweat. They need offensive line, more offensive line, and other things as well. I really want them to keep their picks. They need to do that. And so I could see it, but maybe a little less likely. And I'll throw the Niners in there. Them, again, watching the Eagles win with pass rush in the Super Bowl, and the Niners, when they were their elite years, the earlier elite years out of the last 5-6 years, whatever, they had elite pass rush. Lately, they've been a really good team, but the pass rush has been a little underwhelming. Like Nick Bosa's getting doubled, they got no help. Now, is the solution going out and getting, multiple guys, interior and edge? They got to get offensive line as well. They have to pay attention to that. Finally, I think they will, but they also have to give Purdy an extension. Niners have cap space this year. They don't have a ton in the future, and Purdy needs an extension. So that's the tricky part. So they might just be done for the future then, if they add, and then it's a little, they're a dark horse. But I can see them just going all out to get that pass rush back to where it needs to be. But again, I have specific targets for the Niners. I kind of got off topic and mentioned some earlier in this video. Watch for Joey Bosa, pair the Bosa brothers together. That'll be fun if he gets cut. Samson Ebukam, if he gets cut by the Colts, watch for him. In terms of interior, if Jonathan Allen becomes available, DJ Jones is available, a familiar face. They could bring Javon Hargrave back, even though they're planning on cutting him. There's several solid interior defensive linemen as well in this offseason. So they'll be adding guys. They have cap space this year. But they got to be careful about the future of those contracts. My prediction, the Browns are still very, very stubborn. Of course, that can change. One day we can wake up and boom, it changed. They're taking calls. But right now, and that's really not my predict. Why? We've seen it several times. Every single year, teams go, hey, we don't want to trade our star player, which makes sense. Keep your star players. But maybe it's because at first they don't want to, then they realize they have to, or maybe it's because they want to gain leverage. Like, you're really going to have to, but they're not even picking up. They're not entertaining the calls right now. But things can change. So my prediction isn't them keeping them just because they're holding off right now. It's just very complicated. They actually lose cap space by trading them. It's very complicated. They have to get themselves out of a hole as it is. So they get worse by trading Garrett, a star player that they love, and they get worse financially, but they can gain some good draft picks, which maybe they need. So it's a little tough. But if he's traded, the Commanders are far and away the top one. I haven't gotten any sense the Chargers are interested, but they check off a lot of boxes. They make sense. But the Packers are really, really growing on me as well. But the Commanders are the team I'm really, really watching here. Jaire Alexander, we talked about him in the past being a cut or trade candidate. Both are certainly possible, or the Packers could keep him, but it would probably have to be a rework deal. But he just cannot stay healthy for them, even though it's not major injuries. And part of my prediction, could be maybe they keep him on a rework deal, but that's definitely a possibility. But I'd say a 4th-round pick or a 3rd-round pick if the Packers pay a portion of the salary. But there's going to be teams that go, man, this guy just cannot stay healthy. Do we want him even though he's super talented? Like, if he's fully healthy all year long, he's probably a star corner still. So it's a little tricky. How badly will teams want him? $17 million due. No team's going to trade to pay him that much when he has durability concerns. But if the Packers pay a portion, knock that down to anywhere from, 12 would be lovely. I don't know if the Packers are going to do that. 12 to 15, 14 million. I think teams that'd be cheaper than what they would have to pay if they were to sign him, probably. So I think teams would like that. So a lot of landing spots if the Packers decide to agree to pay a portion. A lot of landing spots. The Jaguars just hired some ex-Packers defensive coaches to their staff, including a defensive coordinator. The Bills, the Steelers, Giants, Raiders, teams that I view as a scheme fit and badly need corners. If cut, I'm adding other teams. The Falcons don't have a ton of draft picks to trade. So, they could still make it happen trade, but I do love the fit with the Falcons. They need another corner. And then Jerry Gray, who is a well-respected defensive back coach, he was coaching the Packers DBs when Alexander was playing his best ball. He is the DB coach, and again, thought very highly of with the Falcons. So, totally can see that fit. The Vikings need a corner. They add ex-Packers all the time. The Packers are certainly not going to trade them to Minnesota. The Commanders are some familiar ex-Packers coaches within the staff there. They can use him with Latimer. I don't think they could trade for him, but they traded for Latimer. They're going to trade for another star corner. Pair him with Latimer, have Sainstro full-time in the slot, and then the Rams if he is available. But if traded, I'm leaning towards the Bills. The Bills don't have a ton of cap space right now. They have to dig themselves out of a hole, so I don't expect them to be super active this offseason, unfortunately. But they can clear some cap space and make some surprising moves. But again, if the Packers pay a portion of the salary, he ends up being cheaper, almost a bargain in terms of the financials. So I think the Bills would love that. They traded for Rasul Douglas last year. That worked out. Packers guy. That worked out for their zone scheme. Douglas played very well, but Douglas also durability concerns up there in age. He's a free agent, and they would view it as an upgrade adding Alexander. And then if cut, again, there is obviously a glaring fit, I suppose, within the coaching staff with the Falcons. So I definitely would watch out for that fit. But of course, the Packers, another part, again, I'm a little split, traded, cut, or back with the Packers on a rework deal. I don't think they're going to keep it the way it is on his current cap hit this year because they can't trust him to stay healthy, so that's the tough part. But a big-time corner that could be available. And that'll wrap it up for this one. We have all kinds of off-season content covering trades, free agency, the draft on the channel. A lot more to come. Things are really going to start heating up as we approach the combine, then free agency. So join us. Like, subscribe, turn notifications on me. Much appreciated. It's going to do it. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.